From the center of the universe, now in its 7th season covering your 19-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast with Argos color analyst Ben Grant and Coach JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name's Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we are here to get you set for Week 4 in the 2025 CFL season with your 0-3 Toronto Argonauts traveling across the province Sunday night to take on the 1-2 Ottawa REDBLACKS. Here's what's on the docket for this week. We'll talk about Coach Dinwiddie's explosive comments following last week's loss, which we didn't get a chance to address in our postgame reaction podcast. Plus, we'll talk about a former Toronto Argonaut quarterback in the news for beating Team USA in flag football this week. The Toronto Argonauts made some transaction moves this week. They signed a run-stopping nose tackle. We'll get into that. Plus, they have actually moved up in the power rankings. Why? What does that mean? Plus, we've got our game preview, our injury report, pick 6, OCDC, one thing, put me down for 20, and challenge flag, all that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Before we get into all that stuff, JB, let's talk about Something in the Water Brewing. It's summertime. I know you've been suffering this week with the heat, the 47-degree humidity. Nothing fixes that more quickly than a ice-cold beer at Something in the Water Brewing. They've got so many to choose from. You can go with Longboat Pale Ale, the beer that was made for fans of the Double Blue, or you can try many of their award-winning beers. Maybe grab yourself a flight and try a bunch of different selections. So Something in the Water Brewing couldn't be better for location, right in the heart of Liberty Village, steps from BMO Field, steps from Lamport Stadium. If you want to head there after catching an Argos practice, visit Something in the Water Brewing. All right, JB, let's get into things. We'll start with Coach Dinwiddie's explosive comments after the game. So I've highlighted a few that I think are maybe being talked about most. I'm going to read through those comments, and then JB, I want your reaction first, and I'll follow that up. So I've cut 4 comments to read. So it starts with, I've never really got after those guys. This is the first time I've had to after a game. Pretty embarrassed by it. I thought it was selfish play, selfish penalties. I told those guys, someone's going home tomorrow. Heads are rolling. So that's comment 1. Comment 2, I think that might open some eyes. We got to come and do the work. These guys are getting paid. This is their job. They need to come here with some purpose. It's coaches as well. It's not a good atmosphere right now. We'll get it fixed. We're men, we're pros, we're paid to do this, but I'm not happy right now. Comment 3, we've got one of our guards who's 280 pounds. I don't know what he did all off season. And then comment 4, we carded this stuff. We went through these looks exactly how to do it, and then it doesn't translate on game day. Well, sometimes guys might have to lose their jobs. The selfishness, I'd rather play with less talent and guys who want to take care of each other. All right, first reactions, JB. What are your thoughts on Coach Dinwiddie's explosive comments post-game?
Yeah. Well, look, I like it. I think we both know Coach Dinwiddie is highly competitive and, a very intense, driven individual. He's been very calm, as we have been on the pod, about the terrible start to the season, because there's lots of reasons for it. But he is the head coach. He's not a random podcaster. So, of course, he's going to be much angrier at their mistakes. I like it. I think the team needed a fire lit under them. I think that this week is an absolute must-win. You cannot go 0-4. There's no point yelling if after 0-4. I think right now is when you have to light a fire under them. I didn't think he crossed any lines. I thought he was absolutely correct that the performance from the team was, unsatisfactory in terms of penalties, in terms of mental mistakes. He's a championship coach. He expects his teams to perform at a high level regardless of who's on the field. And they aren't right now. And I think he spoke to a concern any coach has, which is the rot that can set in when you're not winning. It's why teams that don't win, see Elks of Edmonton, it can get really hard to get that out. It just a general kind of malaise, the energy, the effort, the attention to detail, all of it starts to fade, and he absolutely can feel that. And, It's a risk because, as we always say, if you blow the conch and nobody comes back, like if you light the fire and the fire goes out, I think you really start ringing alarm bells. But I like the gamble to light the fire and to see what they're able to do this weekend.
That's a Lord of the Flies reference that JB just dropped for those of you trying to follow along at home. I agree with everything you said.
Ralph heads out there know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's right. That's awesome. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And did you have, like me, did you have some flashbacks? Like I've definitely ended games like that one and wanted to cut everybody on my team before.
I've never had games, but certainly practices. I mean, I think anybody who's ever been on one of my teams knows that I will occasionally lose my mind at the end of a practice when it's not dialed in, when it's kind of a waste of time, and say things like, I'm not going to, we're going to cut people. I'd rather lose with winners. All of that frustration comes out. I think that, it boils over. So, yeah, I like to see it. And I think it's good. He doesn't do it often, right? He's not a yeller and screamer. So I think the impact of it is much more tangible because he has been calm to really what has been a poor start to the season.
He's in, and I think saying he's not a yeller and screamer is misleading. Like he can be certainly at practice, but
not every press conference, right?
No,
like he isn't
not
on the
press conferences.
He's not, the LSU coach or whatever. He's not screaming and yelling at people on the sidelines, is what I'm getting at.
No, and he's not like that in the media. Certainly, he keeps that time and place. We have seen him lose it a little bit at practice sometimes, but I think that's very different. He's got the credibility to make statements like this. Remember, in his 4 years, he's got 2 Grey Cups and a 16-2 season to his resume. Like he's done pretty well for himself. So you can say stuff like this.
He's like, look, the bar here is not the bar in some of the, without naming other franchises. It's not that, right? We're not going to go out here and go, 4-12 or 4-14. You know what I mean? Like we're here to win. This is the Toronto Argos. We compete for Grey Cups. We don't cash checks and lose games. And so I think his frustration is because his level of expectation is elite.
That's well said. And I think what backs that up too is knowing how well liked he is as a coach. Like he will get on guys. Players love playing for Coach Dinwiddie. And that helps when you've got a message like this because the right guys, the guys that he knows are going to echo this message throughout the locker room are going to be there for him immediately because he is so well liked in that locker room. So I think this was the perfect time, like you said, without repeating everything that you said. Yeah, I agree. There's an element to this that I think works very well. You addressed the timing coming right after this loss. I think it's better in that moment than waiting midweek to do this because he didn't have to come out and say like this is a must-win game or anything like that. Like none of that needed to be said. And the mood at practice was very focused yesterday. Everyone was clearly driven, and not that they're not normally, but it wasn't like things were down at practice. It wasn't like I don't know. I just didn't get it. It didn't look like an 0-3 team at practice. It looked like a very focused group, like we've seen over the last few years. This looked like the same kind of group that was focused on getting one win, one win at a time, going 1-0 each and every week. So, yeah, I thought those comments were good, and I didn't think he didn't call out individual players. And he didn't call out individual coaches. He's making a general statement, and I think he's correct in that. You can't just sort of say, well, we don't have Chad, we don't have Winton, what are we going to do? That can't be the answer. And so, yeah, I really liked his comments. I thought they were appropriate. JB, former Argonauts quarterback Michael O'Connor led Team Canada to a 25-21 win over Team USA. Paul LaPolice, well-known in the CFL, obviously, head coach of that team. They went 4-0 in Los Angeles this past weekend. are moving up the rankings very quickly and actually made headlines because of the fact that Pat McAfee went on his show and blasted Team USA. I think it's fantastic that Team Canada's flag team is getting this much attention. I think it's really interesting to see going forward as we head towards the Olympics, like how many former CFL or even current CFL and NFL guys actually do make their way onto these flag teams. I don't know a lot about flag football. I have kids involved in it, so maybe I know more than the average person. But it's a very different game. I certainly feel way more comfortable with the tackle game and my knowledge of that than I do of the flag game. It's really interesting to me to see guys like Paul LaPolice, who is brilliant tactically, go and take on this sort of challenge and try and sort through some of those questions. Like, do we specifically look at guys with tackle backgrounds? Do we scour the flag football grassroots scene to try and find those guys? If you were starting this program today, if you were Paul LaPolice and you're trying to put together a team, like, how do you begin that process? Do you come in with sort of preconceived notions of pros are the best players, and so that's where we're going to look for our talent?
Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me in some ways of like when Olympic basketball started, and there was that NBA players versus players who played the international rules, and would the international teams be better because they are acquainted with the rules? And there is that to a certain degree, for sure. There are teams in international basketball. Just stay with me here. I'll come around to it. That can play competitively against the NBA pros because the rules are different. The game is different. However, the pros still were able to adapt and defeat them. So I think while you might you might kind of have an expanded view of who you would take. At the end of the day, you want to take the best athletes you can, and these, if you can find professional athletes, I mean, you can learn how to adapt. I would much rather teach a star how to adapt than somebody who is not as proficient.
The thing with taking the pros is that you're getting players who have been very well coached throughout their careers as well. Like a guy like Michael O'Connor, for example, who between his time at UBC and Penn State, like received the best coaching, and then in the pros got that as well. And so, of course, he's going to be a highly accurate, highly intelligent quarterback. You're going to get that. I think where you have to, I think shifting away from the quarterback position, that's maybe where you have to take a look a little bit about, look for some of those guys that didn't crack maybe even college, but certainly the pro level because of their size, because those guys are so difficult to cover and to flag in a flag football game. Those guys that are like 130 pounds, who never had a chance of going pro because of their size, but are just lightning quick. The stop-start is unreal. And those guys, if you can field a team full of those guys, and you can find guys like that, I think that's way more dangerous than your 6'5", 230-pound trained pros that have been playing tackle football their whole lives. I think that's the real challenge in setting that roster. But obviously, LaPolice is doing something right. He's figuring it out. Certainly, Canada, like going to this tournament, and just so people know, because I don't know if this is common knowledge, but like Canada was not among the top ranked teams in the country. Canada, going back to as recently as I guess a month ago, would have been like right on the border of even qualifying for the Olympics. And I think it's still going to be a struggle there. I think they're only taking like 6 teams, which seems ridiculous to me. But it's not like they're number 2 in the world and have been all the time. This is going to be a battle. So to see them go 4-0 to beat Australia, Japan, like USA, that obviously is a really good sign, but they have to keep pushing, and that's going to continue all the way up until Olympic qualifying is over. JB, big signing this week. Literally, figuratively, Jamin Pelly signed with the Toronto Argonauts, nose tackle that you remember last year from his time with the Edmonton Elks. Listed at 6'5", 350, is a load in the middle. Now, looking at him yesterday. I didn't feel like he filled out that full 350. I think he's dropped weight. I think in a good way. I just think I think it's impossible to play CFL football at 350 effectively because, well, first of all, it entirely eliminates you from any special teams play. And as a 350-pound D tackle, you're not playing every down. You're playing one snap out of every 3 or 4, probably, just in run situations, quarterback sneak situations. And that's not enough to justify dressing you on a roster. And so I applaud the weight loss if that, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe he just carries it extremely well, but he did not look like a 350-pound man yesterday. So JB, first of all, I want 2 answers from you. One, do you think the weight drop is going to affect his game as a nose tackle? And then 2, is this, do you think, a response to like Christmas's injury? Is this a response to Toronto getting run on a little bit last week by AJ Ouellette? What do you think led to this move to sign Jamin Pelly and bring him into Toronto?
Yeah, I think, like they are a little thin on the defensive line. We talked about that heading into the season. They have not been great against the run. And if you have to run blitz, if you have to have your secondary coming up in defending the run, it definitely puts a strain on the defense. For sure, if they can find a space eater, or like a 2-gapper, as they sometimes call those guys, like that would be terrific if he could take care of the middle.
I like the idea because there are not a ton of centers that can, like Nicastro is the only center in the league, I think, that can comfortably go one-on-one with a guy like that. And if you're going to, and Toronto has been, they've been blocked a lot with one-on-ones, with being able to double kind of freely where other teams want to. And I think this removes that possibility. You're going to have guard help, certainly when you've got him on the field. And so what that's going to do is it's going to open up some of the other guys. And guys like Andrew Chatfield, for example, who has looked great so far through 3 games. There's a nice piece on him. If you check out Argonauts.ca, Mike Hogan just wrote a really good piece on him and his roots in Ottawa and like how he ended up in Toronto is a pretty cool story. So definitely check that out. But yeah, guys like him, one-on-one, Parrish when he gets back healthy, one-on-one. Like these are matchups that I think are going to be favorable for Toronto, especially as they have to dig into that depth a bit now because, you've lost Cox, who was supposed to be the end on one side. You've lost Parrish. We don't know how long for, but he was the end on the other side. So you've lost both of your planned starting ends. You're going to have to do something to give the guys that are now in replacing them a little bit of an edge. And you do that by forcing teams to double team that middle and really tighten in and leave those guys on the outside with a little bit more freedom of movement. Now, what about the 350 thing? Can you be an effective nose tackle having just dropped 30 pounds?
Well, they're definitely smaller in the CFL. That's a great question. It's hard to say. Like, of course, the lighter you are, the less likely you are to be able to kind of control the center. They definitely want him to be a space eater to try and engage both A gaps. That's definitely going to be the question. I think it's a really nice signing. That is the question mark.
And we'll have to see how soon he gets onto the dress roster. Being a Sunday game, we're not going to get the depth chart for a few more days still. But if he dresses this week, it will speak to the urgency that Coach Dinwiddie feels and has expressed. And if he doesn't, maybe it's just that he needs a bit more time, whether that's I don't think they're going to want him to put weight on, honestly. I don't. I think maybe it's just, getting him up to game speed, not having been on a roster. I think he was released back in January, February of this year by the Elks. But yeah, a much needed signing. Really like him. He's a former supplemental pick too, like Edmonton sacrificing a draft pick to go out and get him. He's a Vanier Cup winner. Like he's a champion that you definitely want on your roster. I think a lot of Elks fans were surprised that he wasn't brought back, but it's because they brought in that $1 million worth of defensive linemen that the Elks took from Toronto as the reason that he wasn't back in Edmonton. JB, explain this for me. The Argos are 0-3, and yet after last week's loss, they've moved up in the power rankings, both on the CFL's main website and on 3 Down Nation. CFL moving them up from 7 to 6 with that loss, and 3 Down Nation moving them from bottom spot, 9th, up to 7th. Is this because some of the rest of the teams, like Edmonton and Hamilton around the league, BC and the CFL's poll, are struggling so badly, or do they see something in the Toronto Argonauts that is making them say, you know what, don't count these boatmen out yet?
I think it's probably more a reflection of how poor a couple of the teams are. So they're really locking into the basement. But, after last week, we were pretty, I think kind of surprisingly positive about the game. I thought it was the best game that the Argos had played. So far as an outside observer, I can see why the coaches were mad. But I thought there were a lot of positives from that game. They were able to stay with Saskatchewan, who is, I would say probably close to top tier team. So I think that's encouraging. I think the league probably feels like a couple of guys are going to come back from injury. In the end, I think it speaks to the belief that, that help is coming, and they're kind of projecting a little bit about what the Argos might be in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, as opposed to, putting them 9th and suddenly they go on a 3-game winning streak.
I see it as, like you, a combination of factors, but I think people can see that help is coming for the Argonauts. Whereas you look at Edmonton, who are largely healthy, and they've looked poor. They looked really poor at home this past week. They looked very poor in the opener in BC. And you look at them and you say, well, what's going to change? Now, they will get better. There's a lot of new pieces. There's new coaching staff. You would expect them to get better throughout the year, but nobody's coming through that door that is going to suddenly transform that team. And I think Hamilton, you look at the same thing, and they've had this rough start, and no one's coming back. Like they've got all their stars there. Whereas Toronto, you're missing Chad Kelly, who might be the best offensive player in the league. You're missing Wynton McManus, who might be the best defensive player in the league. And you're missing Janarian Grant, who might be the best special teams player in the league. And this past week, you're missing Harlamana and Kassar, who might be two of the best special teams players in the league. So I think people look up and down that roster and they're like, yeah, Toronto's 0-3, but reinforcements are on the way at some point. Maybe not this week, but at some point, reinforcements are on the way. So I think that is why, and combined with generally the fact that people have seen Hamilton, Edmonton go through this before. So maybe people are a little quick to throw them into the basement. All right, JB, let's get into this week's game. Toronto at Ottawa. This is a big one. It's made even bigger because of the fact that Ottawa won last week in Calgary, somehow pulling that one out. So they're not coming into this 0-3. They have a lead on the Argos. This is one of those 4-point divisional games. And with the Argos 0-3, it's not must win, but it's starting to get there. And I want to institute a rule for you and I this year. That I'm going to steal from Paul Dehner Jr., a Bengals beat writer and podcaster that I really like. He claims that all media members should only be able to use must win once in a season. That's it. You have your must win armband or hat or whatever, and you can only throw it in once. And so at 0-3, JB, are you throwing in your must-win armband or hat or whatever we're doing? We should actually have a physical must-win flag that we got to throw.
Yeah, I am actually. I will do that. I think this is absolutely a must-win. I think it's a division game. It's a road game. It is the game after the coach lost his mind on the team. It's a long week. They're about to get a bye. I think absolutely this is a must win. I think if you win this game on the road in Ottawa, it changes the mood, the tenor, the focus. Everything starts to pull together. Yeah, so I would say this is a must win for the Argos, avoiding a lost season.
JB throwing his must-win flag in June. This is time. So for the rest of the season, you can't call any game a must-win. That is just to be clear.
We would need to. I think if they can win this game, then they start the path to getting back to second in the East. If they lose this game, now they're 2 behind Ottawa. Look, it's a huge problem. We don't know when Chad is going to come back. We don't know when Winton is going to come back. Like, help is coming, but not imminent. You don't want to be 3-4 games behind an opponent when you're trying to catch up. I think you're getting into real dangerous water there.
I'm not going to throw my must-win flag yet. It's just too early for me. Like, it's such a long season, and I do think the Argos can come back from 0-4 once players get healthy. I think it's important. I think you want to win this week. I think what's more important is you need to show that you came to play. Even if this results in a loss this week to Ottawa, there can't be any questions about effort, about discipline. Those have to be addressed, because if there are, we go back to our opening segment about Coach Dinwiddie. If they come out sloppy this week and look terrible, then that's not a very good sign. It means you now do have to make changes, because clearly the room doesn't have or isn't giving the attention to the head coach, who very much deserves the attention and is one guy who is and should be staying around for a long time. So that would be the concern for me, but it's not enough for me to throw my must-win flag. Let's get into that injury report. So Ottawa is technically just as banged up as Toronto in terms of the numbers. They got a ton of guys on the injury report, but not nearly the stars that the Argos have, and so that's the difference. Their quarterback position is still a question mark. It's up in the air. Again, Drew Brown not playing last week, not playing the week before, is limited in practice this week with that hip injury. I think if I had to guess right now, just like with Chad Kelly, like as soon as you see limited early in the week, he hasn't played for a while, I would suggest that Drew Brown is probably one more week away from returning. We'll see what practice yields today and tomorrow leading up to the game. But I'm gonna plan on it being Dustin Crum at quarterback coming off a win. And so my OCDC segments and everything else that we talk about for the rest of the pod is with Dustin Crum as the starter of mine. So knowing that, Murphy's Law is that Drew Brown will practice full today and be announced as the starter. But he's the biggest piece. The O-line is a little bit banged up, but more in terms of depth than at the starter level. A few injuries on the D-line too. Cleon Lang stands out obviously there. But for the most part, these are not stars that are banged up for Ottawa. And we look across the ledger to the Toronto Argonauts, it's not a good story. So let's start with Chad Kelly, JB, because I had a lot of questions about this, not any that I picked for pick 6, about Chad Kelly still being limited in practice. He's probably not going to be the starting quarterback this week, probably still won't dress this week, I would imagine. And the questions were, why do you then not have him on the 6th game? If we're going to get to 4 and a short week to follow, potentially 5 games, why wouldn't the Argos have put him on the 6th game injured list? And I'll answer this to start. Maybe you can follow this up too. For me, I think the biggest reason is, maybe, first of all, maybe there were setbacks. Maybe they thought he would be back by now. Maybe they legitimately thought this is going to be 2 games, he'll be able to play, or 3 at most, he'll be able to play. And he still may, I suppose, at this stage. But I think the bigger thing is when you're on the 6-game injured list, you are not out there practicing. You're not out there getting reps. You're not out there throwing the football. And I think for both a quarterback and a team leader, I think the advantage is perhaps too great for them to have entirely made him invisible over these first 6 weeks or first 6 games of the season. And I think having him out there limited at least still allows him to throw, still allows him to be out there with the guys. Even just watching him yesterday in practice, like he was spending time with Jared Dagey, going through some footwork stuff during drills and working specifically on footwork for handoffs and play fakes. And Dagey was changing up the way he did it to mirror the way Chad was doing it. And I think stuff like that you can't get if you are on the 6-game injured list are maybe so valuable that the Argos decided, let's not put him on the shelf for 6 games, even though maybe we don't expect them for a little while. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've asked the same question. I think you're probably right. I think they felt he was closer than he turned out to be. Maybe had a bit of a setback. Um, I think if they had it to do again, they probably would put him on the sixth game. It doesn't look like he's going to play prior to the bye. So I'm fine with it. Look, it is what it is. You want to make sure that he is 110% ready to go before he plays and he feels confident in his leg. The waiting is the waiting. I don't know if it would have made a massive difference putting him on injury reserve in terms of things they could have done. I don't think performance wise it probably affected them very much, but it's disappointing for sure. But I had expected him to be out for the full six on IR, so I'm okay with it. I think they have to continue to be patient, which is smart.
And he doesn't look that far away. Like throwing wise, he looks perfectly fine. Like his throwing mechanics look great. You wouldn't know anything was wrong until you get there's still a little bit of the hint of that limp, which I know like some people pointed out after the game last week, just see him walk up and down the sidelines. I think people were surprised that they still saw a little bit of a limp just with him walking and up and down the Argos bench. And so I think until that goes away entirely, I just don't know that you want to have him out there, even if he can still perform the majority of his tasks. Like I think he could right now play to 85, 90% effectiveness, but there's such a risk when you aren't 100% and you are favoring something, in this case a leg, you're at risk of injuring something else. You're at risk of re-injury. And like we've said from the very beginning of the season, it is too important. Chad is too important a player. I think they're doing the right thing by keeping him for as long as possible. But I'm not sure. Again, I'm not medically trained and I'm not out there every single day with them. I don't know how far he is away. Eye test with me, I think he's probably not playing this week, and I think off the short week next week, I think you probably hold him out from that too, and then have him come back after the bye. I think you're right in that schedule, but we'll see. We don't actually know anything, so we'll see how that resolves itself. Other injuries, Wyndham McManus did not practice yesterday with that knee injury. Derek Parrish did not practice with the ankle injury. Obviously, Kenneth George Jr. Did not practice with the knee injury. Other guys up and down the list, Jack Cassar didn't practice. He was, working on the sidelines, rehabilitating that adductor injury. Darius Sirocco didn't practice with the foot injury. Devaris Daniels went full. That's a great sign. He, I think, would be expected back this week. Same thing with Sage Dockstader, who went full. He had the knee injury, and that would, in theory, allow him to return to his left guard spot and return Ryan Hunter to the right tackle spot. And I think that improves that O-line pretty immediately. Dylan Giffen didn't practice with the back injury. Janarian Grant limited. He's been limited from the very start of the season, and I thought we might see him return this week. Actually, I even wondered if we might see him last week, but he's still limited, and I think until you see him go full, just like these other guys, just like with Chad, you don't want to put him back out there until you're fully confident in his ability to return. And then Deonta McMahon did not practice with that ankle injury. So I think we're still looking at probably a similar roster to last week, but minus Derek Parrish and Kenneth George Jr., and you probably add Sage Dockstader and Devaris Daniels in on the offensive side of the ball. But yeah, this is a banged up team, and they're going to be a banged up team for a few more weeks. Pick six, JB. The pick six this week, and let me just remind you what this segment is. This is a segment every week brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, where you have a chance to win a 6-pack of beer for submitting your questions to us. And if we read your question and answer your question on the podcast, you win a 6-pack. And so this week's Something in the Water Brewing 6-pack goes to James Fraser, who you can find on Blue Sky at James Fraser and on Twitter at Bygone Boatman. He's a definite follow. First of all, I've been following his account for a long time. I've had a couple occasions to meet and talk with James, and yeah, knows more about the Toronto Argonauts history than probably everybody else combined. You might have to take out Will Gertler, but everyone else combined. And so he's a great follow. But he had a really good question this week, and I'm going to let you have first crack at this. He asked, which player or coach who departed this offseason is most missed right now? And there's a lot of guys to choose from for players and coaches. JB, what is your answer? Which one guy are the Argonauts missing the most?
Well, they definitely are missing players. I think the overall kind of holistic loss of everybody on the line has been a problem, especially, with Winton being down. I don't know if necessarily there's one person, but I think if I had to choose, it's a great question. I like thinking about it. Probably Flo. I think that Flo brought an energy and electricity to the pass rush that they don't have right now. When you have to deal with somebody who's that fast on the edge, it changes protection, makes things a little easier for the guys on the inside. It just changes what the offense is paying attention to. And when you don't have to pay attention to something, obviously that's going to make you more successful. And we saw Flo. Look, he looks good. I think Flo was a definite loss.
Yeah, I like that answer. The counter to that would be that then you wouldn't have Cameron Judge, and where would this linebacker room be right now without Cameron Judge, given the injury to Winton McManus? But looking at it as just like a single player's contribution, for sure, they definitely miss Flo Remalade. I'm going to go on the offensive side of the ball and say Mackay Polk, which I actually wrestled with this a little bit because I think receiver is a position of strength for the Argos, but they don't have that same skill set diversity that they had last year. And the explosiveness that Mackay Polk offered, especially from the slot position, I think is something that they haven't really been able to find in anyone else. Like Tavares is a very different type of player, and he's playing that spot that Mackay occupied last year. I just don't know that anyone else has been able to run those routes the same way, those over routes where he was so dangerous. And even like any sort of inbreakers on drags and digs where he would catch the football and just find space and was electric after the catch. And I don't know that they've got that in anyone else. I don't think they do. And so for me, even though I like this receiver room, and there are certainly weaknesses in other places, like I think it'd be very easy to say, well, Dejan Allen, for example, on the O-line, or any one of those defensive linemen that you mentioned, like Brinkman or Serezna, they miss those guys without question. But I think Mackay Polk probably single-handedly puts points on the board and probably results in one win, if not two, so far this season. So that's the guy that I'm going to go with. But great question, James Fraser. You can pick up your 6-pack of beer from Something in the Water Brewing the next time you're down there. They'll be looking for you. It's time for OCDC. For OCDC, JB will be the defensive coordinator for both the Ottawa REDBLACKS and the Toronto Argonauts. I will be the offensive coordinator for both the Ottawa REDBLACKS and the Toronto Argonauts, and we will give you our game plans for both teams. Let's start with you, JB, the defensive side of the ball. We'll start with the bad guys, the home Ottawa REDBLACKS. What is your defensive plan for stopping Nick Arbuckle, Mayan Williams, and the rest of this Toronto Argonauts offense?
Well, I would say as a defensive coordinator, I'm feeling pretty relaxed. There certainly is nobody who I'm circling the whiteboard. You look at Toronto's offense; it is not very good right now. It's statistically right at the bottom with Edmonton in most categories. Look, defensively, I think you can just line up and play ball. I don't think you have to do anything particularly exotic. Toronto is not great at running the ball. Passing wise, it tends to be a lot of underneath. They like that kind of deep out. I think that teams will be looking for that now, but so at least they've shown some ability to push the ball down the field, but nothing we need to adjust to defensively. I think from a defensive point of view, I want to bring a lot of pressure, much more pressure than I would normally. I think that you want to blitz quite a bit against this offense. I think you dare the offense to show you that blitzing is, not blitzing is a sign of respect. And I think that you would demand that Toronto make you respect them. So until they do, I'm bringing much like Montreal did. I think I'm bringing a lot of heat from a lot of different directions. I'm going to play a lot of man. I don't think Toronto's receivers can get off from press man very successfully. And, I think you feel pretty confident defensively that Toronto's not going to be able to move the ball on you, unless you really make a big mistake. So I think you're just playing good fundamental defense. It's not very exciting, but I think as a defensive coordinator, you don't need to get outside of yourself here. I think you're just going to play good man coverage and lots of pass rush.
Switching over to the Ottawa offense, I think the plan here has to be kind of two steps to it. And I think you're going to be putting Dustin Crum outside of his comfort zone a little bit, but I think you have to throw the football. I believe that Toronto is going to be stacking up to stop the run this week. I think that's why they brought in Pelly. I think that's what they're going to look at when they watch that Calgary Ottawa film from last week too. I know it was like a monsoon and it was like 2 degrees out, but it was all set up through the run game. Like Crum barely passed the ball at all. And I frankly, I think that's a waste of the personnel that Ottawa has. Now, again, it was pouring rain and windy and cold last week, so I don't blame them for last week's game. But in general, the Ottawa offense has not done a lot through the air, and that's something that I think they really have to do. That's the strength of this team. They might have the best receiving core in the CFL. They got, with Geno Lewis, Justin Hardy, Braylon Addison, Khalil Pimpleton, he's got like 75 yards receiving this season through 3 games. Like he was a lot of people's pick for breakout star this year after what we saw him do last year. And then they got Keelan White, the first round draft pick, who's physically impressive and can do everything you ask of him. Like those 5 guys are all electric, all in their own ways. They've got a great variety in what each of them offers you. You have to throw that football. And so I'm going to ask Dustin Crum to stand in the pocket, fire the football downfield. He'll have those quick hitters to Pimpleton. You can use some jet sweeps and misdirection with Addison too, but I want him to stand in the pocket and fire deep balls, not like Hail Mary jump balls, 50-50 balls, but get it downfield to Geno Lewis, to Justin Hardy, Keelan White, and get Pimpleton involved too. And when things start to collapse, that's when you're going to try and test Toronto's discipline. When there are opportunities to escape the pocket, like we saw Toronto get crushed with, especially in the first week of the season against Davis Alexander, but I think arguably in week 2 as well, where Toronto was giving up yards to quarterbacks and allowing quarterbacks to extend plays. I think you have to test Toronto's discipline there too. I think there's going to be some spying going on. I think Judge is going to probably spy Crum at times. We saw him do that when Calgary played Ottawa last year, or was it 2 years ago? Maybe that's something that comes back in again, but I think you have to test Toronto's discipline like that, test their edge setting. So that is my offensive plan for Ottawa. Let's flip over to the good guys. JB, we'll start with your defensive plan. We just talked about Crum and this receiving core. What do you do to stop them?
Well, they're okay. They're not keeping. I mean, just to flip it, like if I'm the Toronto defensive coordinator, I'm not losing any sleep about Ottawa either in terms of, like, they're fine. I'm a little concerned on some of those touchdowns that were scored against the secondary with Saskatchewan. Passing plays that turn into long yak. I think Toronto's probably going to have to play some zone. I think they've had some issues covering those low crossers and drags and in man coverage. There's been some guys falling down. I agree with you. I think the focus is on the run. Adeboboye clearly will be fired up to try and stick it to the Argos. Full credit to him. They have to stop that run. I think you're looking to do that first defensively. Is you have to keep the run under control, and then defensively, I would probably run a lot of. I would probably run a lot of deep zone. Ottawa's not a deep strike team. They like to keep the ball. They're very good, and they've been very good in the red zone. But I'm okay with that. I think if Ottawa wants to matriculate their way up and down the field, I think that's fine. From an Argos point of view, I like bend don't break here, and then try and hope that Ottawa's red zone efficiency kind of comes back to earth. Right now, it's very good and doesn't really match, I think, their other team stats. So I think you hope that they move the ball a lot, they possess the ball a lot. That's fine. They look like a team that very much you can play bend don't break, and then you keep them kicking field goals. But that only works if you're scoring touchdowns. So that is the hard thing. I don't think this defense is built up to pitch a low scoring game. It's not, it's not an elite defense, especially with the injuries. But I think you can keep Ottawa to kicking field goals, through making sure they don't get easy deep passes and make sure, Crum doesn't get easy first downs. And I do think you can keep Ottawa under control.
It was great to see Adeboboye have a good game last week, and I think Toronto fans were cheering him on and happy to see that. But now they want this to be a little bit more of a struggle probably this week in Ottawa. Switching to the Argos offense, I think it's time for misdirection. I think that's where this is heading. We haven't seen Coach Dinwiddie run a ton of misdirection, especially in the run game, and I really want this to be run-focused this week. I actually want to go kind of old-school football, which I hate, but I think this is the time for it. I think you want to establish the run. I hate even saying that because it's so counter to my offensive philosophy, but I do think you want to establish the run this week. I think you have to. And I think you have to challenge your offensive line and say, you just got to get this done. This is on you this week. Create space for your running backs, create space for Williams, create space for Brown, and you just keep going with those guys and putting your quarterback in favorable situations where he's got 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3 situations. And maybe you just got to force it to be a 9-yard gain through 2 plays and quarterback sneak those first downs. I'm okay with that. That's got to be the plan this week. But the only misdirection we've really seen this year is on plays that I don't love with Arbuckle as the quarterback. Like, they're misdirection plays that count on you sticking with your fakes. I've talked about this in previous podcasts too. And those are plays that work well with Kelly. They work well last year with Dukes, with runners. But with Arbuckle, they're just not being respected. So I think you have to go classic misdirection here with, counter trays and pulling guards and tackles and, kick out, turn up, and follow. I think you can incorporate that with jet sweeps too. And then I think you can run straight forward with a jet sweep fake. We just haven't really seen that stuff from the Argos. We know it's in the playbook. We've seen Coach Dinwiddie run these plays in the past, but I think we have to get back to some of that stuff. And even bringing back some of those wham plays we saw last year that they haven't run yet this year, where you've got a slot back coming across, a guy like Mittal, for example, who's got the size to be able to take on a defensive lineman in the blocking scheme. Or maybe, I guess you could use Calver in that role, but that doesn't seem like what Coach Dinwiddie would do there. So get those counters going, and then that's going to open up the other stuff. You stick with your high percentage passing game. You take the occasional shot downfield when you've got those one-on-one matchups with DeMonte Coxey. That is my plan for Toronto this week. For one thing, I am keeping it super simple this week, JB. We both hit on our one things last week. It didn't result in a win. I'm going simple this week. I want a Toronto Argonauts rushing touchdown. That's all I'm asking for. A Toronto Argonauts rushing touchdown. I think if the Argos get a rushing touchdown, I think they win this game. Short and sweet. What is your one thing, JB?
I'm looking for them to keep Ottawa under 100 yards rushing. I think that is achievable, and I think I think it would be a really nice step for the defense. That's in total, not just one guy. Like, that's quarterback, both running backs, under 100 yards for a team. I think if they do that, they win the game.
That's going to be tough, but I like that. I think they do. I think you're right. If they keep them under 100, they win for sure.
I mean, yours is I hope they get off the bus this week.
It's not quite to that degree, but they need a rushing touchdown. They have not they have not really answered the bell that way. So I want to see a rushing touchdown. I think that stands. Let's get into Put Me Down for 20. JB, we both had a good week last week and are both rolling in golden fleeces. But before we get into our picks for this week, I want to remind you that you should not take any of our wagers seriously. We certainly don't. You should never risk any of your hard-earned money on stuff that we say. And if you are going to gamble, please do not ever wager more than you're happy to lose as the cost of entertainment. That said, JB, we both started out with 200 golden fleeces. You are now up to 230. I'm just behind you at 228. We both went 1-on-1, but we hit on big ones. I hit on Dejan Brissett touchdown at plus 330. You hit on a Kevin Mittal touchdown at plus 260. I lost on Calgary on the money line, and you lost on the Edmonton Elks on the money line. But still a good week overall. Where are you going with your golden fleeces this week, JB?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not in a grinding mood. I'm feeling flush. I'm feeling loose and free. So I'm going to swing for the fences here and see if I can't double down on some of my early success. So my Argos related suggestion is it kind of connects to what you were saying, but I'm going to go first touchdown scored by Williams at plus 800. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Plus 800 is a good price. I looked at that, actually. I was looking at both Williams and Daigie as like the first touchdown. Those prices, but that's such a hard bet. Like you look at those numbers and you're like, oh, plus 800, or in some cases plus 1,600. I looked at Kevin Mittal for first touchdown. I looked really long and hard. And I think it was like plus 1,600 or something absurd. Ultimately, I've decided on something less aggressive. But yeah, I like it. I like that. What's your non-Argos bet?
I mean,
you taking the Elks? It doesn't.
Yeah, I can't get away from my Elks.
Are you actually taking the Elks?
I am taking the Elks. The juice is just too tempting. I know what the book is doing to me. I know that they're just hanging that carrot in front of me, but I don't care. I'm taking my Elks plus 420 to pull off a win. I think that the Elks are going to be desperate for a win. If ever, when the whole world thinks it's going to go one way, sometimes that's the time to take your shot. I'm gonna take my shot with the Elks, and this may bring an end to our relationship between myself and the Edmonton football team.
I think they're 10.5-point dogs in Winnipeg.
I don't want that spread, but I like it.
Winnipeg last year, as I recall, had Edmonton pull forward from the game. It was going so poorly, so we'll see what. We'll see what works out this week. I like the price. I don't know. I can't do it. And I've been very conservative with my plays this week, kind of going back to grinding it out, as you always accuse me of. I like Toronto on the money line. They're underdogs this week in Ottawa. They're going to win at some point. This is just too talented a football team not to. And I think if you're getting juice with a Toronto win, I think you take it. So plus 115, it's not huge, but that's where 10 of my golden fleeces are going. And then the always exciting play of an under in CFL football. I'm putting 10 golden fleeces on a Montreal Hamilton under, and I've actually customized it to get a bit of juice. I'm going under 49.5 at plus 105. So those are my conservative plays for this week, but I feel really good about those. We'll see who is up in the Golden Fleece standings next week, JB. Let's get into Challenge Flag. Last week, you struggled. You were 1-3 with your picks. You're now 6-6 on the year, and I hit one of those losses correctly. You had BC over Winnipeg. That's the play I threw my Challenge Flag on. Winnipeg did indeed pull it out, and so head-to-head, I have 2 wins. You have 1 win. Let's see what week 4 yields. So, JB, first of all, Are you going to hedge again? Edmonton at Winnipeg.
I am indeed.
All right, you're taking Winnipeg.
Yeah, until that loophole is closed, I will take it to my advantage. Winnipeg at home.
And then, like, for every other matchup, there are so many quarterback questions. Montreal at Hamilton, I don't know. I think it's going to be McLeod Bethel-Thompson for Montreal. Alexander hasn't practiced yet this week. Are you taking the MBT-led Montreal Alouettes over Hamilton?
Well, I have not had much success betting against Montreal this year. However, I think this is an absolute. I think Hamilton feels the same way. I think that you want to stay with the pack. I think Hamilton is going to feel like this is a division game. They have to get a win here. I think Hamilton is a perfectly fine team. I think, I like Hamilton at home.
I love this segment. This is my favorite segment this year because of what it puts you through.
I'm just going to pick incorrectly against Montreal 9 times.
I know you will. You're so stubborn. I might have to ride that.
Come on, Hamilton.
BC at Saskatchewan. Again, we don't know about either quarterback. Trevor Harris hasn't practiced this week with concussion concerns following last week's win against the Argos. BC Lions quarterback Nathan Rourke has been limited. I don't know his status heading into the game. Is it going to be Masoli again? Who knows? This one is a bit of a coin flip. Who are you picking, BC or Saskatchewan?
I know. You know what? I'm gonna say BC because I'm gonna hope that Rourke plays and that Harris doesn't.
Yeah, I would have trouble challenging that because I think.
But if it's Mazzoli, good.
I know he looked rough last week. He's not the guy we remember. It's sad to see him out there like that actually, because I really liked him when before all of the terrible luck that he had year after year after year with those season-ending injuries. He was a great quarterback, and I hate to see him the way that he's playing right now. It's just not. It's not what you want to think of when you think of Jeremiah Masoli. But yeah, we'll see. I think Rourke probably tries to do everything he can to play in this game, so I don't want to go anywhere near that one. And then lastly, Toronto at Ottawa. Are you taking the Argos or your REDBLACKS?
This is an easy pick. Of course, as I mentioned, this is my must-win. Certainly not going to pick them against Coach Dinwiddie and the crew in a must-win. And I also will never pick the All Caps again. So that was a no-brainer. Toronto.
All right, well, I can't challenge. I'm not going to take Edmonton in my challenge. I can't go against BC because I agree. I think Rourke's going to play. I'm not going against Toronto. That's my moneyline play of the week. So I have to, and I really like this. I will go with Montreal. That's my challenge flag.
Yeah, that's a great game. I think that's going to be a great football game.
It might be. So I'm with MBT this week and the Alouettes, hoping they can upset your Hamilton Tiger Cats, JB.
Yep, Ham Jam is ready.
This week's game, Sunday night, 7 o'clock in the nation's capital, Toronto at Ottawa. You could, of course, hear the TSN 1050 broadcast with Mike Hogan and myself. A pregame show starting at 6:30, kickoff at 7 o'clock. It's a big one. It is so big that JB has thrown his annual must-win game flag. So you got to make sure you catch this one. That will just about do it for us on this pregame walkthrough episode of the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.